Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day and out of the conference to attend our side event. We're talking about implementing the SDGs in Canada's Biosphere reserves. It's a Together Ensemble 2023 side event, and it's brought to you in collaboration with the Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association, the Fundy Biosphere, and the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere. So our plan today is to walk you through a bit of an overview. So that's my job, the Biospheres 101. Then we're going to ask Mount Arrowsmith and Fundy to talk about their local examples of implementing the SDGs. And then we're going to have a quick panel session at the end. So a few disclaimers. So CBRA's mandate. So CBRA is the national organization. It helps to support and promote the work of the 19 biosphere regions in Canada. Its role is to support, but in no way a regulatory or authoritative organization over the biosphere regions. We work at the service of the sites and work on the collective needs or the collective desire, strategic way forward, encompassing all the biosphere regions. And I've already done it since I started talking, but I tend to use biosphere, biosphere reserve, biosphere region, all kind of interchangeably. They are the same thing. The official word is biosphere reserve, but there's a movement in Canada to kind of move towards the use of the word region for a number of different reasons, especially the Indigenous or reconciliation context and history. The fact that one of the core fundamental principles of a biosphere region is the fact of people and nature together in balance. Not reserved or boxed off or not allowing people into nature. And then the last one is just kind of looking at biosphere regions from a regional or watershed scale. It kind of better denotes what we do. Speaking of what biosphere regions do, this is a quick 101. So it's a UNESCO designation. You can't wake up tomorrow and decide that you want to be a biosphere region. You have to be working in the community for a number of years. There has to be a community engagement and support towards sustainable living, as well as, quite frankly, not every place is special enough to be a biosphere region because there has to be areas of significant biodiversity. Biosphere regions are also places, so physical areas. There's 19, and I'll show you a map in a minute, but they are areas, so usually around a couple of municipalities or a region, a watershed or two, kind of at that scale. They also have nonprofit organizations that are behind the designation, so you get an area receives a designation, but there's a nonprofit behind that to lead the activities, to convene the partners, to kind of push projects forward towards the goals of the biosphere. And then the biosphere regions in Canada, all 19, and there's 700 across the world, they all have the same framework, but different implementations. So I like to equate it to using the same blueprint to build a house structure, but the decor inside the house is somewhat different depending on the context, the landscape, the needs of the people living in the house. So we all have the same structure, but inside could be quite different. We also operate at a number of levels. So the local level, the regions I was talking about. We're also in Canada focusing on some regional collaborations. So that's, for example, like the prairie biospheres. They are biosphere regions, but they also have a similar landscape, similar needs, similar potential policy background, etc. So they're working at a regional scale. Then we have the national scale where I'm at, and then another regional scale, which is called EuroMab, which is the Europe and North American biospheres as a network for collaboration. And then the international or the global scale, and I already referenced the 700 plus in the world. The biosphere regions really work on a number of things. They're all interconnected. It's the conservation of natural and cultural diversity, climate action, sustainable living or sustainable development, and reconciliation. But really, when you boil it down, it's around people and nature together in balance and using a whole of society approach. Sound familiar? Does it resonate with anyone around why we're here today? it falls very much in line with the SDG approach. But really, I like to think of the biosphere regions as community developed organizations that look at community and culture, the local economy, and nature, all at the same time when they're thinking about their activities and the way they'd like to proceed as a region. In relation to the Sustainable Development Goals, I've put a black circle around the ones that most of the biosphere regions are focusing on. Now, given the interconnectedness of all of the work and the SDGs, biosphere regions are touching on a lot more of these, but these are the ones that are kind of at the forefront of the biosphere work. So that's life on land, life underwater, climate action, decent work, etc. The map of the 19 biospheres. So the Man in the Biosphere program, which is that the kind of blueprint, the program that all the biospheres across the world are under. It's been around for over 50 years. In Canada, biosphere regions had started in 1978 with Mont Saint-Hilaire, which is like southeast of Montreal. Our latest one is Akatsum Howe Sound in BC. We have the largest ones are Sachwe in the north, followed by Manicouagan in Quebec. And given what's happening right now, there's not a biosphere region across the country that's not affected by the forest fires that are happening. We're spread out in 8 provinces and 1 territory. And given the nature of, why they're so special and the landscapes that they inhabit, it's not really all that difficult to imagine the effects that they might be having. So just to wrap up quickly, a couple of stats. So again, I already mentioned 19 biosphere regions. There's 2.8 million Canadians living within the regions. They are hosted by 50 Indigenous hosts and 100 municipalities. We're looking at, every year, we're looking at 30,000 hours of volunteer time. So that's individual private citizens committing to contributing to the mandate of the biosphere region, whether that's through being on the board, helping at events, doing activities on their property and more. We have 11 national parks within the biosphere region. So not every biosphere region has a national park, but they do have some form of national or provincial park or some other form of protected area as part of the overall region. Over the 19 regions, the 19 organizations, we're employing over 100 people, and we're bringing in approximately $9 million worth of funding into those regions. So it's not spread out evenly over the 19, but we are bringing a lot of money into the regions in which we're working in. And then lastly, before I pass it on to Mount Arrowsmith, I just put this slide in here to look at the fact that when you think of the range for the organizations, when they started, their maturity, the needs at the local level, they all are at different stages in their capacity and their programming. So they may be looking at a focus of biodiversity, but also considering as a secondary priority, sustainable cities or decent work or one of the other SDGs. And some are working at a high level for all of them, and some are ramping up. So just to keep that kind of in mind as we walk through. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mount Arrowsmith.
Awesome, thank you, Kate. So my name is Courtney Bourgeois, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute, which is the research institute associated with the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region. So the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region, or the MABR, which I'll refer to it probably from now on out, was designated in 2000, and it's located on the eastern side of mid-Vancouver Island, spanning from approximately News Bay to Qualicum Bay, and from the top of Mount Arrowsmith down into the Salish Sea about 300 meters. And so this vertical elevation spans just over 2,100 meters, and this is what makes the MABR so unique among Canadian biosphere reserves. The MABR is situated within the traditional territories of 7 First Nations, those being Sinas, Qualicum, Comox, Snuneymuxw, Seychat, Hipakaseth, and Didadat. And to all of these, we are appreciative of and we extend our gratitude for the opportunity to live and work on their lands. So in the MABR, we are focusing on a number of ways to bring the SDGs into our Biosphere region and into the local communities. We have recognized the role that Biosphere reserves have in supporting the 2030 agenda, and so we have made it a priority in our region. While we've been working with the SDGs since 2018 within our research institute, our application of the SDGs in the Biosphere region increased in 2020. In 2020, we had the opportunity to hire an SDG intern through College and Institutes Canada funding. And with this, in addition to refocusing some of our internal resources, we had the opportunity to implement several initiatives. And so today I'm going to just talk about a few of those initiatives, and I'll start with the Promoting the SDGs in the MABR project. So again, this launched in 2020, and it aimed to promote awareness of the 17 SDGs in the MABR and determine how organizations are contributing to the SDGs locally. And with this project, we had several initiatives on the go. In the first year, we were able to launch a social media campaign called Fast Fact Friday. It's actually a pretty cool little campaign. You can see one of our screenshots on the side. And so with this campaign, we highlight different initiatives in the region that are contributing to the SDGs. And this campaign is still ongoing and it has regular posts. We also created a series of short videos that introduce the SDGs and the role that Biosphere reserves play in supporting them. And these videos showcased a few organizations that are doing great work. These videos were released following an online symposium that we held for this project in February of 2021, which included 6 presentations from local groups and organizations who had the opportunity to share the great work they were doing to advance SDGs in the region. And as part of the project, we conducted a survey and several interviews with organizations and groups in the Biosphere region to make some connections between their work and the SDGs. With this data, we were able to produce a report, as you can see here, titled A Model Region for Sustainable Development, Supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the MABR. This report discusses the ways in which stakeholders, groups, and organizations in the region are contributing to the SDGs, and you can find this report on our website. Overall, the promoting of the SDGs in the MABR project aim to increase awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals while promoting local initiatives that contribute to the advancement of the SDGs. Another focus of ours is localizing the SDGs, which includes educating community members on SDG localization. So we all know that the SDGs were developed for countries and nations in mind, which means that they can be quite overwhelming for communities, organizations, and individuals to know how they can contribute. And so we've been looking at SDG localization. And with this, we've conducted a number of presentations to discuss how others can do this. So for example, in November 2021, we hosted the Planning for a Sustainable Future Approaches for Localizing the SDGs on Vancouver Island Symposium. This online symposium brought together 34 community planners from municipalities and First Nations across Vancouver Island to discuss how the SDGs can be localized for the island and be incorporated into community planning. The symposium welcomed a speaker panel comprised of staff from the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation, the City of Kelowna, and Clayoquot Biosphere Trust. All of these people were able to share their experience that they've done locally, localizing the SDGs. The symposium also included a workshop where participants identified 5 priority SDGs for community planning on the island. I want to note that these were SDG 13, SDG 17, SDG 12, SDG 10, and SDG 11. So you can kind of see the resemblance that Kate had mentioned in the priority SDGs. And so from there, we worked to develop localized targets to address these priority SDGs. And we found that the workshop overall was very effective and was able to initiate a discussion for the best approaches to localizing the SDGs in our communities on Vancouver Island. We've also provided training sessions for community groups who are interested in learning more about the SDGs and how they can localize them in their context. So we've offered a few different types of presentations and workshops, and we found that this is important because localizing the SDGs, communities can then, and organizations, also individuals, can help governments, both federally and provincially, to contribute to the global agenda while also meeting the needs of their local communities. And we continue to facilitate conversations about how to localize the SDGs within our work and our projects ongoing. Another project initiative we have is MABR Youth Community Grant Program. And so we launched this program in 2021 to provide opportunities for youth to implement projects in the region that align with the SDGs. So I'm going to ask Kate now to share a video of our first project that was funded through this grant program, which was at Qualicum Secondary School.
I'm Addie Nicula. I'm a grade 11 student at Qualicum Secondary School, and this year we started a garden club. Our project is trying to take this space here, which is a bit of a fenced-in field at the moment, and turn it into a useful garden that can supply food for our foods program at the school, and also provide an educational forum for students to learn about Indigenous plants and their uses. Our goal is to supply fresh vegetables and fruit for our school community, and locally it would be great to have a kind of outreach program with the other public garden we have in Qualicum to form a kind of companionship that we can use to have a few more plants in here and get tips from other gardeners who've done this a lot longer than we have.
The SDG Youth Community Grant Program aims to provide students with the opportunity to develop and implement a program in their local community, making change locally, but also affecting the global positive momentum.
In its first year, we were able to fund a student group from Qualicum Secondary School to revitalize their garden space.
The Mount Aerosmith Biosphere region and the Research Institute implemented the program to advance and increase awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals within the area and for local students.
So some SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that this garden is planning to implement are, well, number 2, zero hunger, and number 3, health and well-being. And we plan to do that by providing food for our school community, especially kids who may have fewer good meals at home, and it's fresh fruit and vegetables, which has tons of nutritional value, which also aids in health and well-being of our school community, especially when we start bringing in fresh veg to our foods program.
As our future leaders, youth play a crucial role in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, both at the local and global scale. Recognition and advocacy of the SDGs within schools holds potential to expand into the wider community and empower individuals to promote more sustainable ways of life.
I'm just so thankful that I've been able to be part of this garden club, and that everyone here has worked so hard to get this project on the ground, and I'm really thankful for all the funding that we've received. It's just massive support.
Thanks, Kate. So yeah, as you can see, the funding had a great impact for the first set of students, and we're excited to continue offering this funding annually to youth who are supporting the advancement of the SDGs in the Biosphere region. And so we hope over time this funding will support many amazing projects in the region. And moving forward, we are excited to start the planning of the first MABR SDG Festival, which will take place in the fall of 2024. The festival will be a 2-day event held in partnership with 2 local high schools in the Biosphere region. The festival aims to bring together various organizations and stakeholders to host activities that will increase awareness and engagement with the SDGs. There will be an emphasis on youth engagement and education, and this will include a showcase of student education and awareness campaigns that they will be they will have been developing since the beginning of the fall semester leading up to the festival. In addition, the festival will continue to localize SDGs, foster community partnerships and collaboration, and initiate action. Our local municipalities have shown support for the launch of this festival in 2024, and we hope that this will be a great success and become an annual event for the region. And finally, one last thing I want to highlight is how internally we have integrated the SDGs into our organizational reporting and planning. Our annual reports for both the Biosphere region and the Research Institute include linkages to the SDGs. So as you can see here is the 2022 annual report for the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region. We have a page that introduces the Sustainable Development Goals and acknowledges the role that biosphere regions have in implementing them. And then throughout the document, we have highlighted different SDGs that connect to the different projects we have on the go, whether that be indirectly or directly. And so by incorporating the SDGs in our reporting, we are able to consciously make connections between our region and the global framework. And this provides us for a good way to measure our impact and identify any gaps that we need to work towards. So that's all I have for you today. But if you have any questions, you can follow us on social media or contact us through our website. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jen from the Fundy Biosphere region.
There, I'm just, I don't know if I can, I can spotlight myself for everybody. Okay, cool. Okay, so I am Jennifer Dingman. I'm the Executive Director of the Fundy Biosphere region here in New Brunswick. And our organization is working to contribute to build vibrant and resilient human environmental communities through conservation and promotion of sustainable development. And so we have really built a lot of our work around the SDGs and also the needs of community, and then tied those back to SDGs. So we're kind of tackling it with the intentional to build towards SDG movement, but also the intentional for the community. What do they need, and how does that tie into the global goals? So just to orient yourself for what the biosphere, where our biosphere is, we are in southeast New Brunswick. The Fundy Biosphere region is this greenish bit. It's on Wabanaki territory in southeast New Brunswick, and it starts at the Nova Scotia border up through the north of Moncton and down to St. Martin's. And it includes Fundy National Park. And then this map also just sort of identifies that this is the only region in North America that there are 2 UNESCO designated sites. So the bluish color near the bottom of the screen is the Stonehammer Geopark, and in the yellow is where we overlap. So we've really looked at how we can partner and collaborate and work together as a geopark and a biosphere, both UNESCO designation, and work on collaborative efforts. Okay, you can go to the next slide. We've built our strategic plan around the SDGs, and the strategic plan for the biosphere is to look at biodiversity conservation and protection of ecosystem services. So this is our goal is to restore and maintain the ecological integrity of the region by engaging visitors and residents, community members, businesses, decision makers, all participating in the development of policy, resources, and programming for the promotion of land stewardship and protection of protection and connectivity between protected areas. And one of the examples of us working on this is through a Nature Legacy partnership with many different NGOs in our province and the government to look at how we can move the needle on land conservation on Crown land. And obviously this ties into sustainable communities, climate action, life on land, life below water, and these kinds of things. Our sustainable relationships between people and nature, our goal is to support, promote, and celebrate the sustainable relationships between people and nature and develop initiatives and innovation in the region in all sectors. So our intention is to build a culture of sustainability through education, stewardship, and awareness of the region's natural and cultural assets, as well as individual and community ecological footprint. So having people understand their role individually, but also in the community, in the environment, in protection, but also in how they impact the environment as well in terms of ecological footprint. Work that we've done on this is some fun stuff. We've worked with a local brewery to create a local beer called the Fundy Forager, and that was with local foraged ingredients. And it gave us an opportunity to provide some communication and education around what people and the environment, how they can connect. And the sustainable relationships between people and nature obviously relate to affordable and clean energy, sustainable communities, sustainable cities and communities, and climate action. Celebration of natural and cultural heritage. Our goals are to enhance the awareness of the region's natural and cultural heritage through education, programming, and storytelling. And we started a program a few years ago called Ride the Tide. It's bike tours that go along our beautiful Petitcodiac River, which experiences a tidal bore. So this is where when the river's flow meets an incoming tide, there becomes a wave, and it's pretty spectacular to see this giant wave come through the river and actually reverse the flow of the river. And so we worked with a number of partners to have an educational opportunity to understand the river, the Indigenous community members who use the river since 10,000 years ago up until today, and just provide some information about how people interact today with the river in terms of drinking water and wastewater, all of these kinds of things. And we also have an Amazing Places program, which looks at how people can experience the region through beautiful and exceptional places on trails within the biosphere in 50 different sites. So this celebration of natural and cultural heritage aligns with good health and well-being, sustainable communities. Sorry, I keep saying that one wrong. Sustainable cities and communities, life below water, life on land, and responsible consumption and production. And our last strategic pillar is knowledge sharing, which most biospheres, I would argue probably all biospheres have this as a strategic pillar. And this goal is to support opportunities for information and knowledge sharing at the local, provincial, national, and international levels through partnership, networking, and collaboration, and work related to the Sustainable Development Goals around climate action, life below water, and life on land. And we're part of quite a number of different groups, but one specifically is the World Network of Island and Coastal Biosphere Reserves, and we participate with a Zero Plastics Working Group to look at how we can share localized stories about reducing plastic consumption in our biospheres and how that can have a global impact when it's a cumulative impact from each biosphere region. You can go to the next slide, Kate. So I'm giving sort of like the high level, our strategic plan and how we sort of build our programs around the Sustainable Development Goals. But I wanted to give an example today of a specific project or a specific initiative and effort that we're putting together with many partners in our region. And this is the Rural Upper Bay of Fundy Partnership. I also have Micah Fardy on the call here today, so she can chime in as well. But and she's the lead for this working group and proponent for the development of this strategy. But the Rural Upper Bay of Fundy Partnership came together as a community-first model for destination development and regional collaboration. Can flip to the next one. And just again, to orient yourselves, so you can remember where the Fundy Biosphere region is around the Upper Bay of Fundy, and this region is the rural Upper Bay of Fundy location where this partnership is underway. And it's really focused on the idea that it's a rural region. It's relatively unpopulated, although there are multiple communities in this region. But there's an exceptional amount of assets for the square footage of this place. So there's a national park, There's a provincial designation of a parkway. So this is the Fundy Trail Parkway. There's 2 provincially owned parks, Hopewell Rocks and Cape and Rage. And then there's a year-round private destination, Foley Mountain Resort, mountain biking and skiing in the winter. And then 2 UNESCO designations in this region, the Stonehammer Geopark, the Fundy Biosphere region. So this region here, it's a rural region and it is home to an exceptional amount of natural assets that are related, have been related to tourism. So using tourism as an opportunity to look at sustainable development goals, how this region is currently operating and achieving some of the goals and where that needs to go. You can flip to the next slide. So the Upper Bay of Fundy Partnership had a series of meetings with community members and operators and government and all sorts of stakeholders. And the major findings from that work, it was a year-long worth of stakeholder collaboration and engagement, was that destination first is really the most important piece. That we're welcoming people here, but really we need to ensure that the locations that we're welcoming people to are being protected and conserved, as well as rural first. So the Upper Bay of Fundy needs to be a self-sustaining destination that is looking at the integrity of the rural regions that house these natural assets as the most important piece of the puzzle, rather than these large adjacent communities that people are flying into or staying at the large hotels and then sort of popcorning out into the more rural regions. And then local communities first. So local residents, operators, and investors want to work together to coordinate and collaborate and co-create how they want to see their home, their region, prepare to welcome guests. So there was this long, intensive sort of stakeholder collaboration looked at these 3 pieces as the most important part. And then from that work, can you flip the slide? From that work of consultation, it was really narrowed down to 5 UN SDGs that were the most important part to focus on, to move forward, to move the needle. And that was around decent work and economic growth, sustainable cities and communities, responsible production and consumption, life below water, life on land. You can flip again. And so what that means is the Rural Upper Bay of Fundy Partnership has focused on what's achievable in the short term, but also what's the long-term vision for this partnership and how tourism can be the driving factor or the mechanism to achieve some of these sustainability goals. And so the work has really focused on a regional coordination of the challenges around staffing and staff housing and what are opportunities in order to change that or fix that or help solve that problem. And then also to look at how that we can develop more self-guided opportunities. So there's an opportunity through an online app to have a regional self-guided tour. People can come to the region, they can enjoy the local, all the things that the region has to offer and the local assets, but they can do it in a self-guided way that integrates how we want people to interact with this region in a sustainable and regenerative way. Through education and training, we've developed an online staff training tool that helps so that all partners can join into this training opportunity so that they get the basics of why this region is so important and what is so significant about, you know, all of the conservation spaces and the way that we manage our natural resources, but also basic stuff like WMIS and these kinds of things. So in order to be able to sort of streamline our the partnership and the making sure that everybody is an ambassador for the region, this online staff training tool is really going to support that. And then there's a sustainability assessment that's being created to be able to understand how the region is meeting sustainability goals and what's the gaps, where can we work on things. partnership, engagement, and facilitation, their organizational strategy, and a Fundy Connect Summit. There's been a lot of work around getting people together, understanding how we can work better together and what those gaps and goals are and how we can tackle them. And then the regenerative tourism development piece of this puzzle is that we're looking at a regional trail network and a lodging prototype. So examples of how regenerative tourism at this spectacular, relatively rural, like hikeable lodge can provide really like experiential regenerative tourism opportunities that support and not only maintain the natural integrity of the region, but also add to it by being regenerative. And so the last piece of my presentation is just to share so I want to share the example of the Upper Bay of Fundy partnership and how we're working with sustainable development goals in the tourism realm, but also that the Biosphere has produced 3 different reports that support that knowledge sharing piece. So we have the sustainable development goals and the Fundy Biosphere region, how we play a role in moving the needle on sustainable development goal achievement. And then a more broad how biospheres in general across the country can support sustainable development goals. So those 2 reports were created, and then later the sustainable development goals in tourism in the Upper Bay Fundy was produced for that, what I just spoke about with the partnership, looking at the assets, the tourism assets in the region, and sort of like exceptional operations that are happening that are meeting those sustainable development goals. So that's it for me. Contact information is here, and then I'd be happy to answer questions in the question period.
Thanks, Jen. I apologize for kind of moving you along a little bit at the end.
That's fine. I like that. That's good.
So I think we're going to skip our first 2 questions and go to the question 3, 4, and 5. So I've asked each of the Biosphere regions to kind of think about these questions and have a quick. We've got like 7 minutes left. So if we look, asking Courtney first. Courtney, what do you think the advantages of using the SDGs within your Biosphere region work?
Well, I think the first is that they do provide a framework which is both globally and locally accepted and used. And so with this framework, as I kind of mentioned, it's easier to measure what we're doing, and we can like apply what we're doing, whether that being indirectly or directly, to a global like movement. And I think the indirectly and directly piece is important because there's a lot of great work happening, especially in biosphere regions and just in general, I think. And sometimes it's kind of easy to forget the overall impact of what can be like these initiatives could be working towards. And so when you can see that your initiatives are working towards a global framework, it kind of like makes you feel a little bit better, I guess, and kind of, shows you what you're actually doing does matter. So okay. I think that's a quick answer.
No, I was just going to say it's like a contribution to a bigger picture, right? It's like the small scale stuff leading up to a bigger vision. Jen, anything to add on that question?
No, just the same as like those like small actions, like we have the Great Fundy Coastal Cleanup. Everybody kind of pitches in to do a small section of beach, but we all provide information that is then collated and tallied, so we know what the impact on the entire bay is. I picture that this is when we work towards SDGs in our own work and then are able to report on them, then there's an opportunity to really have that cumulative impact that helps not only our localized region, but the globe in general. And it sounds like Micah might have something to add.
Micah?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking Jen did such a great job in terms of talking about the Rural Upper Fundy partnership. For us, one of the advantages of using the SDGs in that work, particularly when we're looking through the lens of tourism and seeing how we can use that to the advantage of community local economies and development, it's such a sound framework that's principle based. It can be a very busy competing place of culture and perspective and beliefs. And really, by an advantage of the SDGs, it really helps frame those conversations when we look at our decisions, when we look at actions that we're taking. It's a nice anchor to be like, okay, how is what we're doing actually impacting and related to at least one or more of the 5 that Jen referenced that are we're certainly focusing on in our destination development and stewardship work. So I think that's an excellent advantage of incorporating the SDGs at the core of the work we do.
Thanks, Micah. So Jen, we'll come to you. What do you think is limiting you and your Biosphere from doing more SDG work? You've already started at a great start, and you're already incorporating them into your strategic plan and your tourism assets and the overall plan of how Fundy can be doing more SDG work. But what's limiting you?
I think that there is. I don't know that there's and Micah, you can think of who you want to answer to if you want to, but to me, it doesn't seem like we're limited on SDG work. I think the limiting factor is maybe like understanding everybody who is already playing a role in SDGs, like moving the needle on SDGs, but also how that information is then reported and collected in more of a cumulative way. I think there is a lot of opportunities and work happening, and there's a lot of conversations around common goals and policy development and really that building the efforts to achieve the SDGs. But to me, the limiting factor is actually the reporting and the communication amongst all the stakeholders that are in the game of SDGs.
Thanks, Jen. Courtney, anything to add on that?
Sorry, I had trouble hitting my unmute. I think Jen makes a great point. I think there's so much work happening that you don't know what's going on, and that's a limiting factor. But I think one of the main obvious ones is just limited capacity, including funding. And we don't always have the capacity to take more on. We don't have the funding to do more work. So that probably would be the biggest one.
Thanks, Courtney. And so the last question is kind of a theme of the conference in general, is how can we accelerate Canada's SDG progress? What needs to be done differently to achieve more? So really, we've heard a few things: capacity, knowing who the players are. From my perspective at the national level, I think the Biosphere regions, as well as other organizations, are already doing a lot of great SDG work. They're just not necessarily classified as SDG work or identified. So I think if there was an opportunity to be able to look at what's already happening within a SDG lens and be able to communicate that out, communicate the impact that the Biosphere regions, but other organizations as well, there would be actually a lot more progress towards the SDGs than is currently being valued. Courtney, do you have anything you want to add to this question before we wrap up?
Honestly, I think you kind of covered what I had. I think one of the biggest things too is just remembering that we are in the decade of action now, and that means more action needs to happen, and there needs to be a little bit more of a shift away from awareness raising towards action, and that's something that we hope to implement within the MABR. So yeah.
Thanks, Courtney. And Jen, any last comments on this question?
I think it's been covered by you guys.
Awesome. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Courtney and Jennifer, both of the Biosphere regions. And I saw some Biosphere region folks and colleagues in the participant list, so I appreciate the support. And we welcome, if there's any further questions, you can get in touch with me and I can connect with the appropriate Biosphere region. And thanks for taking the time. We appreciate you connecting about Biosphere regions and the SDGs. Have a great day, everyone.